Today's launch of the National Persistent Identifier Recommendations and Roadmap is a transformative milestone in strengthening Ireland's research infrastructure. By providing clear guidance for the adoption and implementation of persistent identifiers across the research community, this roadmap lays the foundation for greater transparency, reproducibility, and global collaboration, positioning Ireland at the forefront of modern open research practices. To help deliver this project, NORF commissioned the scholarly communications consultants Morebrains Cooperative. Their work included conducting a national survey and carrying out community consultations through workshops and focus groups. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who got involved in these community consultations and helped with this work. In particular, I would like to thank the members of the Persistent Identifier Task Force who supported this work and endured what I'm told is a particularly grueling strategic SWOT analysis. The members of the task force are Lisa Griffith, Director of the Digital Repository of Ireland, Deirdre Quinn, Senior Manager Research and Research Policy at the Higher Education Authority, Susan Riley, Director at IRL, Frances Madden, Assistant Head of Library Services, Research Services at TU Dublin, Beth Kazook, Project Manager at the Digital Repository of Ireland, Killian Joy, Head of Open and Digital Research at the University of Galway, Catherine Ferris, Open Research Scholarship at IRL, and Jenny O'Neill, Research Engagement Officer at HEAnet. I'd like to make a special mention of the contribution of Aisling Conway, who worked as maternity cover for the NORF Senior Programme Manager while much of this work was being conducted. And it would be remiss of me not to call attention to the invaluable contribution of Lisa Griffith to this project. It is no small exaggeration to say that it is Lisa's drive and commitment that brought this project to fruition. In the absence of a National Open Research Coordinator, Lisa chaired the PID task force and led the extensive engagement plan, all while continuing to perform the duties of her actual role as the Director of the Digital Repository of Ireland. So if you'd just join me in thanking each of these members of the task force. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Josh Brown to launch Ireland's National Persistent Identifier Recommendations and Roadmap. Josh is Morebrains Cooperative Lead for Research and Strategy and has a decade-and-a-half experience in open research advocacy, infrastructures, programme management and community building. After qualifying and working as a librarian at the University of Brighton, Josh moved into open research full-time. He managed the University of London Repository Consortium, managed JISC's innovation programmes for research information management and scholarly communications in the UK. He then went to CERN, where he helped lead the Scope 3 initiative, which changed subscription journals to open access publishing in high energy physics. Josh held a number of roles at ORCID, including 3 years as Director of Partnerships. Since leaving ORCID, Josh has continued to explore the challenges and opportunities of advancing and opening up research, working with funders, libraries, research institutions, policymakers, and research infrastructure providers in dozens of countries on 6 continents as an independent consultant, and since 2020 as a founding member of the Morebrains Cooperative. Josh, the stage is yours.
I'm Josh Brown. Without further ado, I'll dive into explaining some of the background for the project, some of our recommendations, and a bit more of a detailed view of the roadmap that emerged from this. But just before I start, I'd like to just say that one of the really key things about this work that's going to help it deliver value to all of your work is the focus in the National Action Plan for Open Research on identifiers that are themselves open. The metadata associated with them is available under a CC0 license. And what that means is they can act as a bridge between all of these systems. They can support the sharing of information much further back into the research life cycle, so getting way before publication. And I think the key thing here is this supports understanding and evidencing research impact, whether that's social or economic. It enables improved research integrity, greater accountability and greater transparency throughout the research life cycle. And it enables us to understand and track the changes that we're trying to see, which is fundamental to things like the open access monitors. So it's really good to see the kind of level of joined up thinking that underpins the action plan and the projects that you're undertaking. It's great to work with you all. So as Michelle mentioned, we did some major project activities. It consisted of a survey, a cost-benefit analysis to help us understand kind of the potential scale of benefits that persistent identifier adoption could bring. We took the lessons from this survey and from the cost-benefit analysis and conducted focus groups, workshops, and a particularly grueling strategic SWOT analysis. And I think the key thing here is, I won't go into the details of this, these are all in published reports, but one of the things I wanted to say is, People in institutions and funding bodies and researchers across Ireland wanted PIDs to increase the interoperability of their systems and to improve and reduce the burden of reporting. The problems they foresee in this is the lack of buy-in from researchers, especially in using PIDs in the systems that they use every day, and the cost of implementation. These are the barriers that we need to try and overcome. The cost-benefit analysis, the TLDR here is if you spend money on supporting researchers, you lower the cost, potentially by as much as 50%, and you get to about more than 1.6 million euros in net savings after you've invested in the PID integrations, the PID memberships, and the staff to support that. So well worth doing. But the key thing also here is the time savings that brings. That frees up time for researchers and research support staff to use their expertise for the things that are really valuable, which is research. So I'll just give a quick recap of the recommendations. These have been shared in a couple of previous events, so I'll go through these quite quickly to get to the new information, which is the roadmap piece. So we have 15 recommendations, which are set out in, the rationale for these is set out in quite a lot of detail in our report, which has just been published. And there are 4 headings: governance and leadership, community, culture change, and technical support. So thinking in terms of that governance and leadership, the theme underpinning this is that without the kind of political impetus to keep movement going, then it is not going to be delivered. You need that accountability, you need somebody to take ownership of this agenda and to keep pushing it forward. So we've made 4 of these recommendations that we put first, because without these, none of the rest are going to take place. So bringing together a cross-stakeholder governing group to make sure that the voices of every sector of the Irish research community are represented and heard. Getting senior sector leaders involved, and we're talking institutional leaders, leaders of funders, politicians, if that's possible, senior civil servants, everybody who actually has a budget and the ability to direct institutional and organisational agendas is going to be really key. Clear ownership of the PID agenda enables that responsibility and accountability, and an Irish PID Concordat to articulate that shared vision and the common goals for all of this. In terms of community, we felt that strengthening the voice of research management professionals is going to be absolutely essential to this, and building out a network of networks, so bringing together those existing community networks, whether that's the emerging IRMA and SONRI and all others, and bringing these together so that you can actually kind of have a coherent plan and lines of communication, but also get some bottom-up information, grassroots information about what's happening, and build a shared resource library to help make this whole process more efficient and deliver some of these economies of scale. Our culture change recommendations really are about laying the foundation for a change in culture, providing the scaffold, if you like, for helping researchers to understand the benefits of this kind of openness. For some disciplines, this is quite a radical change in the way they think about sharing research process as well as research outputs and outcomes. So we feel that kind of having these kind of national community of champions embedded within those communities and helping to understand what's happening elsewhere in the world and show how this transcends disciplines, transcends national boundaries, is going to be really important to helping to deliver that change. Finally, technically, PIDs are underneath all of this. There is a clear technological basis for this. PIDs are built into the software systems. They are digital tools for digitized research. So understanding this is really important. So having a central PID support service, which we scoped as having roughly 3 FTE, with 2 of those roles being technical and 1 being communication and community, to help people understand how to do this, make the process of integration much cheaper and quicker, identify some of those central and most important integrations, and then to continue to invest in targeted support for those institutions who are least well positioned to do this. One of the key findings that comes out of the cost-benefit analysis is because PIDs are a network tool, they create network effects. And you're not going to get the full benefits of that until everybody benefits. It doesn't matter if they're in a tiny institution with 3 or 4 researchers or the biggest institution in the country with the most research funding. They all need to have access to these tools for it to be really effective. And that equity is really underpinning a lot of the work we've been trying to do. And it was really emphasized in the community consultations as well. So, everything so far has been recaps from previous presentations, so I'm very pleased to get on to the kind of the real meat of this presentation, which is the roadmap itself. So we've broken this out and we've taken those recommendations, and in consultation with colleagues at NORF and the PID task force, we've thought about what actually these recommendations imply in practice and what's actually going to be needed for them to be effective and to deliver the value that we identified through the previous phases of the project. So there are 8 separate areas of activity in this roadmap. So the first is to do, as we talked about, this kind of ensuring that you have sector voices being heard, shaping this, that this activity is able to adapt to reflect changing and evolving community needs and priorities. A cross-stakeholder governing group is going to be absolutely essential. One is it helps to maintain some kind of sense of accountability and transparency around this project itself, especially as funding is being dispersed, is being envisioned as being dispersed through this. But it also creates those lines of communication with key sector initiatives and produces kind of ownership for specific activities. Now, we envisage this starting now, and in the first case, you need to bring together a kind of representative sample of the community, drawing on sector bodies and, say, disciplinary societies to make sure the voices of researchers are heard, and bring this together to actually decide and establish the membership of the group and get that going. Once that's going, then the group itself takes over delivering some of these things later down. But this would really be going on and kind of getting set up right through next year and into 2026. And immediate priorities is, as we said, is engaging sector leaders. This needs to be on institutional roadmaps. This needs to be on people's planning. It takes time and commitment to unlock development resources. The IT staff in universities or in systems providers are overstretched as is, so making sure that these folks are engaged and telling people this needs to be in your planning for next year or the year after. If you think about it, if you develop your software development roadmap for next year, you then build that, you then have to roll that out, folks have to update their software. It might be a couple of years before it actually gets into the systems researchers are using in anger, as it were. So making sure that you have this kind of focus and the leadership to deliver that is really, really central. One of the fundamental things that I think is going to enable the community to work together really effectively, deliver economies of scale, speed up PID adoption. One of the things, again, is the faster you can get to comprehensive PID adoption, the more of these benefits you're going to realise. That's really important. So as a PID support network, as we said, we envisage this being 3 FTE positions. This sits alongside the existing support teams based around the DataCite and ORCID consortia, and it's a complement to them. It extends their reach, it extends their capacity, but it also enables you to have that dedicated resource for thinking about specific integrations of a wider range of identifiers in a wider range of systems that are supported by DataCite and ORCID and so on. So applying for funding, someone needs to host this organisation, someone needs to pay these people's salaries, there needs to be funding available to pay those salaries, and you need to recruit that. So realistically, we're talking about applying for funding next year, waiting till the appropriate budget year for that to come through, and then hiring those people. So we don't envisage this actually being established and people being in post and this being fully operational until probably 2026, just being realistic. So we want to set kind of achievable timelines and set accurate expectations here. So it's going to take time, but it is worth it, and it's worth investing that time to make sure that all the subsequent investments are targeted and effective. I think one of the key things here is this shared vision. We mentioned in the recommendations establishing a PID concordat, and this really is kind of about delivering this. It's a shared vision. It articulates what the ask is from each community. So, you can say within this PID concordat, you could say what an institution would do, what the library should be doing, what the repository should be capable of, what funders should be doing, what they should be doing in their grant application or their reporting systems. And funders can sign up, institutions can sign up, sector bodies can sign up to this and say, we support this and we commit to implementing this alongside the PID support network. The idea here is it also gives you kind of the levels of expectations, it gives clarity around the roles, helps people to plan, but it also keeps everybody focused on a shared common set of goals for the Irish PID research community. And one of the key results of all of this will be expanding PID adoption and coverage. As we said, the greater the coverage, the greater the benefits. The more equitable the coverage, the greater the benefits for everyone. And understanding this and extending that PID adoption and the coverage of identifiers. So it's not just the number of systems that they are used in, it's the number of entities they can identify and the number of relationships between entities that can be described and captured through them. that maximizes the benefits. If you can understand much more about how a grant led to recruitment, led to the use of a specific facility or specific instruments, the data sets that came from that, the software that we used to interpret and analyze that data, and how that led to different publications and different impacts and outcomes, and all of the people who contributed, not just by authoring or signing on to grants, but everybody who contributed expertise and support throughout that process, you have a much richer picture, a much more transparent picture, and a much more accurate picture, and you are rewarding the excellence wherever it is found in all of your institutions, and that's really key. So understanding this, we want to make sure that there are quick wins that are clearly identified and specified and delivered, and you can show here are quantifiable benefits, here are the results that came from those quick wins, because we want to, as we say, if you're talking about a 3-year software development pipeline, there will be things that could be done more quickly. If I reach for a lovely little cliche, there's the low-hanging fruit. Deliver those, and people can see that's a motivation. Some of those quick wins help people to keep moving through what is quite a lengthy process of adoption here. So these key communities that might need additional support, this is another component here. I mentioned smaller institutions or disciplines who have been, I'm going to say, historically underserved by the transition to digital research. You know who you are. I think those groups need to have targeted support and funding to underpin that support. They need to see the commitment of the whole sector to actually kind of making sure this equal access to these valuable tools and priceless improvements in research workflows are available. So then that's integrating those in those systems and making sure that there is support on an ongoing basis, overseen by the governing group, delivered by the PID support network team, and with support from funders and others especially to make sure that these are resourced sustainably. There is an emerging community of practice. I'm looking around the room at members of this emerging community of practice. This needs to grow. It needs to be structured in a way that actually enables this agenda to be articulated and to continue to evolve. I think, start thinking about that. The governing group, there may be subgroups, maybe time-limited efforts for specific activities, or there may be kind of ongoing interest groups that sit alongside it to make sure that there are pathways for all of this to reach out into communities and for those community voices to be heard and fed back through to the central initiative. Again, building on this community network of community champions and making sure that there is actually review and some accountability here as well. So the governing group would be looking at the work of this network of networks, identifying gaps, making sure it's effective, helping to make sure that it's actually meeting established and identified community needs and continuing to search for new community needs to meet. Another key area here is resources to support all of this work. A lot of this, PIDs are both a technical component of a digital research ecosystem, but actually they involve changing the way people work. People need to accept them. People need to be comfortable using an ORCID ID. People need to understand what happens when you click on a DOI. Not necessarily the whole technical resolution thing, but it needs to be something that people are comfortable engaging with, using and working with, and recognize the value of these things. So advocacy is really, really critical. So one of the first activities and a really critical activity for the PID support network will be auditing and identifying existing resources, filling gaps, and then continuing to grow that resource library. This actually helps speed up all kinds of work across institutions. If you can just pull down a draft pamphlet explaining the value of ORCID and just swap out the logo for your own institution and send that out, that's a lot quicker than having to try and kind of balance that messaging and develop it for yourself and your own community. Things like this are really critical. Finally, the last one is really evaluation. It's making sure that there is, as I keep talking about accountability and responsibility, but I think given that these are transforming the way research is done, we want this to be open, we want this to be transparent, we want this to be equitable. Understanding that, you need to be able to kind of hold people to account for that and make sure that there is focus on delivery. If you are talking about investing money, there are savings to be delivered, and we want to make sure those savings actually do get delivered. So understanding that is really important. So we want to see annual progress reports, and really that kind of, if we're talking about, say, looking at the Impact 2030 agenda, there's a good time to have to stop and really take stock. We envisage the PID support network being funded for a 5-year period, so this is also at the end of that cycle, and it may be that you decide, that's it, we're done, we've achieved it, this has achieved its own momentum, we don't need to do any more, or it may be that you decide there is a time-limited or a long-term extension to that work. I'm not going to predict what the results of that evaluation might be, but taking stock and deciding if you want to carry on and if so, in what form, is going to be really essential. So also, I think towards the end of this period, there's an opportunity to develop another 10-year vision for PID delivery in Ireland. It may be new entities, new technical possibilities. It may be focusing on the metadata that's associated with a particular subset of PID, say projects, for instance. There may be a lot of value that could be unlocked here that will become visible as the adoption and coverage increases over time. So this is really important, and it should not be done by the PID support network or the governing group itself. This is where we go back out to the community and ask them to mark the homework of the people who have been tasked with delivering this. So that's the action plan and the roadmap taking us through to roughly the beginning of 2031. But what are we talking about happening now? And I think this is really important because this is laying the foundation for all of the rest of this roadmap to be delivered and the paths to be travelled. So the first is engaging with senior sector levels, senior sector leaders across the whole of Ireland. And some of these people have been involved in the project, and they've been a really constructive, well-informed and engaged presence. We need to grow that. As I said, this is about kind of building that momentum, getting this on institutional, organisational agendas, and getting some energy behind this. Launching and promoting the PID recommendations and roadmap. Well, we can tick that one because it's just happened. We've launched it, so that's good to be here on when that something comes off the to-do list. Always satisfying. Maintaining current engagement with international PID initiatives. There are things like there's a National PID Strategies interest group at the Research Data Alliance that members of this community have been really well engaged with and have participated in. That needs to grow, engaging with other countries who are doing the same work, and learning from their lessons and from their mistakes is going to be really valuable. I think also there's a chance here for Ireland as actually getting ahead of the curve. A lot of these national PID strategies are still actually really at the kind of planning and design and debate stage. So you have a chance here to be one of the first countries in the world to actually plan and implement one of these. And lots of folks have learned lessons that you can bring in, but it means that you will be global leaders in this space, which fits that kind of idea of Ireland actually leveraging its exceptionally connected research community. One of the things that came out of the cost-benefit analysis was how international Irish research is, how collaborative it is, and actually engaging with these international partners and engaging with these international open infrastructures is a way of exposing that and sharing that and actually demonstrating just how Ireland is contributing to the wider, to global research initiatives and Ireland as a destination for researchers as well. Understanding the power of that network and that you are actually coming to a real hub is really going to be valuable. We believe that kind of, socialising the roadmap is critical. Getting that governing group set up and helping people understand it and set their expectations of it will be critical. And one of the things we would like to see soon is a kind of first annual progress review and just a report. What's actually been done, what's being delivered, who's doing what, so that we can actually start to kind of use this as benchmarking for future progress. Where we are in 2 years' time, we're not going to really know how much progress we've made unless you can look at things like the PID survey we've done, maybe run another one to see how adoption is changing and understand how this is actually changing researchers' lives and the systems that are being used in institutions. So that is the end of my presentation. I think we've got a few minutes for questions, but if you do have any questions, my email address is on the screen. Do feel free to get in touch anytime. I'd be more than happy to hear from you.